The coffee spilled across her keyboard at exactly 9:47 a.m. Elena Martinez watched the brown liquid seep between the keys of her ancient Dell computer, the same machine she'd been assigned 3 years ago when she started as a junior administrative assistant at Meridian Defense Technologies. The entire IT department would later spend hours analyzing what happened next, but none of them would ever suspect that the clumsy secretary in Cubicle 47B had just executed the most sophisticated cyber attack in corporate history. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her supervisor, Margaret Thornfield, materialized beside her desk like a storm cloud gathering momentum. The woman's perfectly pressed blazer and clipboard seemed to radiate disapproval as she surveyed the mess. Another accident from the girl who couldn't handle basic office equipment. Another reason to question why human resources had hired someone so obviously unfit for corporate life. Elena fumbled for napkins, her hands shaking as she dabbed at the keyboard. The tremor wasn't from nervousness about the spilled coffee. It was from the adrenaline of watching lines of code execute flawlessly behind the mundane facade of her morning routine. While Margaret lectured her about workplace professionalism, Elena's mind calculated the precise moment when her hidden program would breach the competitor's firewall, 3 floors above in the executive suite. But what Margaret Thornfield didn't know about Elena Martinez would change everything in exactly 43 minutes. Meridian Defense Technologies occupied 47 floors of gleaming steel and glass in downtown Seattle, a monument to corporate efficiency and military contracts worth billions. The building hummed with the quiet intensity of classified projects and government deadlines. On the 32nd floor, executives made decisions that shaped international security policy. On the 15th floor, engineers designed systems that could topple governments or defend nations. On the 3rd floor, Elena Martinez organized filing cabinets and answered phones. Her workspace reflected her apparent status in the corporate hierarchy, a cramped cubicle wedged between the copy machine and the men's restroom, fluorescent lights that flickered just enough to strain her eyes, and a computer that wheezed like an asthmatic patient whenever she opened more than 3 programs simultaneously. The other administrative staff pitied her assignment to Department K, the cybersecurity division that handled the company's most sensitive digital infrastructure. Department K's reputation for eating assistants alive was well established throughout Meridian. The previous secretary had lasted 6 weeks before transferring to accounts payable, claiming that the technical jargon and constant pressure had given her chronic migraines. The one before that had quit after 2 months, telling anyone who would listen that trying to understand the engineer's requests was like translating ancient hieroglyphics while blindfolded. Elena had now survived 3 years in Department K, a feat that impressed no one and puzzled many. Her colleagues assumed she stayed because she couldn't find better opportunities elsewhere. A high school dropout with no college degree, no technical certifications, and an address in the low-income housing district across town. She rode the bus for 90 minutes each way, carrying her lunch in a paper bag and wearing the same 3 blazers in rotation. The engineers treated her like expensive office equipment, functional when needed, invisible when not. They barked requests for printed reports, scheduled meetings, and coffee runs without bothering to learn her name. Dr. Richard Hawthorne, the department head, had introduced her to visiting clients as "our girl" for 3 consecutive years. She nodded politely, took notes in handwriting that looked appropriately clerical, and maintained the facade of someone grateful just to have employment. What none of them realized was that Elena Martinez possessed an intellect that operated on frequencies they couldn't detect. While they discussed network architectures and encryption protocols in voices loud enough to carry across her cubicle, she absorbed every technical detail with the precision of a digital recorder. Their casual conversations about classified projects became her informal education in advanced cybersecurity, taught by some of the industry's leading experts who never knew they had an audience. Her computer, ancient as it appeared, had been quietly modified over months of careful work. The hard drive contained partitions invisible to standard scanning software. The processor had been upgraded with components she'd purchased using her meager salary, installed during lunch breaks when the office emptied. The network connection ran through routing protocols that would have impressed the very engineers who ignored her existence. Elena had learned to code at age 12, using library computers and stolen Wi-Fi signals from coffee shops. By 16, she'd been freelancing under false identities, creating websites and debugging software for clients who never saw her face. The technical skills that could have earned her six-figure salaries remained hidden behind a carefully constructed persona of cheerful incompetence. The morning routine never varied. Arrive at 8:30, check voice messages, organize Dr. Hawthorne's calendar, and respond to emails with the grammatical precision of someone who'd learned English as a second language. The engineers would filter in by 9, drinking coffee she'd prepared and discussing problems she'd already solved in her head. They spoke about her as if she were deaf, analyzing her performance like laboratory data. Margaret Thornfield served as Elena's direct supervisor, a woman whose entire identity revolved around maintaining corporate standards and identifying efficiency problems. 23 years with Meridian had taught her to spot weakness in employees, to document performance issues, and to recommend terminations with clinical detachment. Elena represented everything Margaret found frustrating about modern hiring practices. Affirmative action, she muttered to other supervisors, lowered standards disguised as diversity initiatives. The antagonism between them had developed gradually, like poison seeping through groundwater. Margaret criticized Elena's typing speed, questioned her ability to handle complex scheduling, and assigned her the most menial tasks available. Each interaction carried the subtext of inevitable failure, the assumption that incompetence would eventually expose itself through accumulated mistakes. Elena endured the treatment with patience that bordered on sainthood. She apologized for errors she hadn't made, accepted blame for system failures beyond her control, and maintained professional demeanor while being treated like an intern who'd overstayed her welcome. The other administrative staff watched these exchanges with mixture of sympathy and relief that Margaret's attention focused elsewhere. But beneath the surface compliance, Elena's mind worked with the intensity of a quantum computer processing infinite variables. Every insult became data to analyze. Every assumption became intelligence to exploit. She studied Margaret's patterns like a chess master planning moves 20 steps ahead. The woman's predictable cruelty would become the very mechanism of her own destruction. Dr. Hawthorne represented a different category of antagonist. His dismissal of Elena stemmed not from active malice, but from unconscious bias so deeply ingrained that he never questioned its assumptions. A brilliant engineer who'd built his reputation on innovative solutions to impossible problems, he simply couldn't conceive that significant intelligence might exist in forms he didn't recognize. His background included 3 degrees from MIT, 2 patents in encryption technology, and consulting contracts with agencies so classified that their names appeared in documents only as acronyms. The Department K team respected him not just for his technical expertise, but for his ability to translate complex concepts into practical applications. When he spoke about cybersecurity, senators listened. When he recommended defensive strategies, the Pentagon implemented them without modification. Yet this same intellect that could unravel sophisticated cyber attacks became completely blind when evaluating human potential outside traditional parameters. Elena's lack of formal education rendered her invisible to his consideration. Her gender and ethnicity triggered unconscious assumptions about technical capability. Most importantly, her position as administrative support placed her in a category of people whose opinions simply didn't register in his mental framework. The irony was that Elena had been reading his published research papers for years, finding elegant solutions to problems he'd identified but couldn't fully resolve. Her suggestions, if offered directly, would have advanced his work by months or years. Instead, she learned to plant ideas through carefully orchestrated conversations, allowing him to discover insights that originated from her analysis. The department's daily rhythm provided Elena with constant intelligence about Meridian's most sensitive operations. Morning briefings discussed client vulnerabilities and defensive recommendations. Afternoon meetings reviewed ongoing projects and resource allocation. Evening debriefings analyzed threats and updated security protocols. She heard everything, understood everything, and remembered everything while maintaining the appearance of someone barely capable of operating a photocopier. The coffee spill that morning had been calculated to the second. Elena knew that Margaret conducted her weekly performance reviews every Tuesday at precisely 9:45 a.m., walking through the cubicle area with checklist in hand. The timing ensured maximum visibility for Elena's apparent clumsiness, reinforcing perceptions of incompetence while providing perfect cover for what was actually happening on her computer screen. As Margaret lectured her about workplace professionalism, Elena's hidden program executed its primary function. Lines of code that had taken her months to perfect moved through Meridian's network like digital ghosts, copying files, analyzing security measures, and preparing for an operation that would redefine the boundaries of corporate espionage. The target wasn't Meridian itself. Elena felt no loyalty to the company that treated her like furniture. But she also harbored no desire for petty revenge against employers who simply couldn't see her capabilities. Her actual objective operated on a scale that dwarfed office politics and personal slights. Kronos Industries, Meridian's primary competitor, had been conducting cyber attacks against American infrastructure for 18 months. Their activities remained invisible to conventional intelligence agencies, hidden behind layers of misdirection and false attribution that made their operations appear to originate from other sources. But Elena had been tracking their signature patterns through her unofficial monitoring of global network traffic, identifying connections that eluded professional analysts. The evidence existed in fragments scattered across dozens of systems, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that no one else had thought to assemble. Kronos had infiltrated power grids, water treatment facilities, and communication networks with surgical precision, creating backdoors that could paralyze entire cities if activated simultaneously. The scope of their preparation suggested an attack timeline measured in weeks, not months. Elena's plan required accessing Kronos through Meridian's classified networks, using her employer's legitimate intelligence connections as a launching point for unauthorized operations. The risk was enormous. Discovery would mean federal prosecution for espionage, decades in prison, and the destruction of everything she'd worked to build. But the alternative was allowing a coordinated attack on civilian infrastructure that could kill thousands of people. Her hidden partition contained not just the offensive tools necessary for network penetration, but also carefully compiled evidence of Kronos' activities. Screenshots of compromised systems, logs of unauthorized access, routing information that traced their attacks back to source servers. The intelligence represented hundreds of hours of analysis, patterns recognized, and connections identified through methods that formal agencies couldn't replicate. The mathematics of her situation were brutally simple. Elena possessed information that could prevent a national catastrophe, but lacked any legitimate channel for sharing that intelligence. Her identity as a corporate secretary meant that attempts to contact government agencies would be dismissed as pranks or mental instability. Even if she somehow gained audience with appropriate officials, her evidence would be questioned, and her methods scrutinized until the opportunity for prevention had passed. So she would have to stop Kronos herself. The program executing behind her coffee-stained keyboard represented the culmination of everything she'd learned about network architecture, encryption systems, and digital warfare. It moved through Meridian's security measures like water finding cracks in stone, exploiting vulnerabilities that existed not in technology but in human assumptions about who could access what information. Elena had been preparing for this moment for 8 months, ever since her analysis had revealed the true scope of Kronos' infiltration. The timing was critical. Tuesday morning provided optimal conditions for her operation, with most of Meridian's cybersecurity team focused on client presentations and routine maintenance. The coffee spill gave her excuse for the unusual keyboard activity that her program required, explaining any suspicious network traffic as accident recovery rather than intentional breach. Margaret's lecture concluded with a warning about workplace standards and the importance of maintaining professional appearance. Elena nodded contritely, promising to be more careful while her program completed its initial penetration of Meridian's classified servers. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The woman's patronizing tone carried undertones of satisfaction, the pleasure of someone who enjoyed exercising authority over those she considered inferior. As Margaret returned to her office, Elena began the delicate process of transitioning from corporate assistant to digital operative. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, executing commands that would have impressed the engineers who dismissed her as barely literate. The ancient Dell computer that everyone mocked as obsolete transformed into a weapon system capable of reaching across continents to strike at targets hidden behind military-grade defenses. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Meridian's cybersecurity experts debated theoretical vulnerabilities and designed defensive strategies, their secretary was about to demonstrate offensive capabilities that exceeded anything in their professional experience. The woman they treated as intellectual furniture was preparing to engage in digital warfare against adversaries who had eluded detection by the world's most sophisticated intelligence agencies. But first, she had to survive the next 43 minutes without anyone discovering what she was really doing. The coffee spill had bought her time and provided cover, but Margaret would return eventually, and Dr. Hawthorne's morning meeting would conclude with his customary walk through the cubicle area. Elena needed to appear completely normal while conducting operations that pushed the boundaries of technological possibility. Her hands moved across the keyboard like a pianist performing a complex sonata, each keystroke precisely timed and intentionally executed. To casual observers, she appeared to be cleaning up the coffee mess and responding to routine emails. In reality, she was orchestrating a cyber attack that would penetrate some of the most secure networks on Earth, gathering intelligence that could prevent national catastrophe while maintaining the facade of a clumsy secretary who couldn't handle basic office equipment. The program's progress indicators showed steady advancement through Meridian's internal systems. Phase 1 complete, establishing encrypted channels for external operations. Phase 2 initiating, mapping routes to Kronos Industries through legitimate intelligence partnerships. Phase 3 preparing, offensive tools loaded and target acquisition beginning. Elena Martinez, the woman everyone called just a secretary, was about to remind the world that intelligence existed in forms that conventional wisdom couldn't recognize. The next 43 minutes would either validate her months of preparation or destroy everything she'd worked to build. But as she watched her code execute with flawless precision, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years of corporate invisibility. She felt powerful. She felt capable. Most importantly, she felt ready to show them exactly what a simple woman could accomplish when underestimated by everyone around her. The clock on her computer screen displayed 9:51 a.m., 40 minutes until her world changed forever. The coffee stain on her keyboard had already begun to dry, but the program it had concealed was just beginning to reveal its true potential. The first firewall crumbled at 10:14 a.m. Elena watched the security barriers dissolve like sugar in rain as her program carved pathways through Kronos Industries' outer defenses. Her fingers maintained their steady rhythm across the keyboard, typing responses to mundane emails while simultaneously orchestrating one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks in corporate history. To anyone observing her cubicle, she appeared to be struggling with basic correspondence, occasionally pausing to wipe coffee residue from her workspace. The irony of her situation struck her with crystalline clarity. 3 floors above, Meridian's executive team was conducting their weekly briefing on cybersecurity threats, analyzing intelligence reports about foreign infiltration attempts, while remaining completely oblivious to the digital warfare being conducted by their own secretary. Dr. Hawthorne would be presenting his quarterly assessment of network vulnerabilities, using terminology Elena had taught herself through years of covert research, never knowing that the woman who organized his files possessed capabilities that exceeded his own. Margaret Thornfield's voice carried across the cubicle farm as she berated another administrative assistant for improper document formatting. The woman's obsession with procedural compliance served as perfect camouflage for Elena's activities. Anyone investigating unusual network traffic would assume it originated from the cybersecurity department's legitimate operations, not from the corner cubicle where the incompetent secretary spent her days fighting with obsolete equipment. Elena's program had been designed with surgical precision, incorporating lessons learned from 18 months of tracking Kronos Industries' activities. Unlike conventional cyber attacks that relied on brute force penetration, her approach exploited the fundamental assumptions that governed corporate network architecture. Security systems were designed to detect external threats, not internal operations that appeared to originate from authorized sources. By routing her attack through Meridian's own classified channels, she had transformed herself from potential intruder into trusted insider. The second layer of Kronos' defenses proved more challenging. Their security architects had implemented adaptive protocols that adjusted to penetration attempts in real time, creating moving targets that frustrated conventional hacking methodologies. But Elena had anticipated this obstacle, programming her tools with machine learning algorithms that evolved faster than defensive countermeasures could adapt. Her code didn't just attack Kronos' systems, it learned from their responses, becoming more sophisticated with each exchange. At 10:23 a.m., she achieved her first significant breakthrough. Access to Kronos' internal communication servers revealed a treasure trove of operational intelligence that validated her months of painstaking analysis. Email chains between department heads discussed timeline acceleration for something called Project Blackout. Technical specifications referenced infrastructure targets that matched her own research into vulnerable civilian systems. Most critically, she discovered confirmation that the attack was scheduled to commence in exactly 11 days. The scope of Kronos's preparation was breathtaking in its audacity. They had infiltrated power distribution networks across 17 states, water treatment facilities in major metropolitan areas, emergency communication systems, and financial transaction processors. The coordination required to synchronize attacks across such diverse targets suggested an organization with resources that dwarfed conventional corporate capabilities. This wasn't industrial espionage, it was preparation for digital warfare against civilian populations. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she absorbed the implications of what she'd uncovered. Her informal intelligence gathering had stumbled upon evidence of the most ambitious cyber-terrorism plot in American history. The death toll from simultaneous infrastructure failures could reach hundreds of thousands, with economic damage measured in the trillions. Yet she remained the only person on Earth who understood the true scope of the threat, trapped in a corporate hierarchy that rendered her warnings meaningless. Dr. Hawthorne's voice echoed from the nearby conference room as he explained network topology concepts to visiting clients. His expertise was genuine and impressive, but it operated within frameworks that couldn't conceive of threats like Kronos. Traditional cybersecurity focused on defending known vulnerabilities against predicted attack vectors. Elena had discovered adversaries who created vulnerabilities through methods that formal education didn't address, utilizing strategies that government agencies couldn't imagine. The third phase of her operation required penetrating Kronos's command and control servers, the protected core, where actual attack tools were stored and deployment schedules maintained. This represented the most dangerous aspect of her mission, as detection at this level would trigger immediate counterattacks designed to trace her activities back to their source. If Kronos's security team identified her location, they would discover not just her identity, but also Meridian's involvement, creating international incidents with consequences she couldn't predict. Elena implemented a technique she'd developed through years of freelance security consulting, creating false attribution trails that would misdirect any investigation away from her actual position. Her attack appeared to originate from multiple sources simultaneously, routing through servers in different countries, with timing patterns that suggested coordination between separate hacking groups. If discovered, Kronos would waste valuable resources pursuing phantoms, while the real threat remained invisible. At 10:34 a.m., Margaret appeared beside her cubicle again, clipboard in hand and disapproval radiating from her rigid posture. Elena's supervisor had developed the habit of conducting random performance evaluations, looking for evidence of the incompetence she was certain existed beneath Elena's polite exterior. The timing was unfortunate, as Elena's program was attempting its most delicate penetration of Kronos's core systems, requiring her full attention to monitor progress and adjust parameters in real time. The conversation that followed would later be analyzed by federal investigators as a masterpiece of misdirection. Margaret criticized Elena's email response times, questioned her understanding of department procedures, and assigned additional filing tasks designed to overwhelm someone already struggling with basic responsibilities. Elena responded with appropriate humility, apologizing for perceived shortcomings while her hidden program executed commands that demonstrated technical sophistication beyond Margaret's comprehension. The juxtaposition was surreal. As Margaret lectured about proper telephone etiquette, Elena's code was bypassing military-grade encryption that protected Kronos's most sensitive operations. While being criticized for slow typing speed, she was simultaneously managing network connections across 4 continents with precision that would have impressed professional intelligence agencies. The woman who questioned her ability to handle simple correspondence remained completely unaware that her secretary was conducting digital warfare against America's enemies. Margaret's critique concluded with a formal reprimand for the morning's coffee incident, documentation that would be added to Elena's personnel file as evidence of declining performance. The irony was exquisite. Elena was being reprimanded for clumsiness during the exact moment when she demonstrated capabilities that redefined the boundaries of individual achievement. The coffee spill that Margaret interpreted as incompetence had provided cover for the most sophisticated cyber attack in corporate history. As her supervisor returned to her office, Elena's program achieved penetration of Kronos' command servers. What she discovered there exceeded her most pessimistic projections. Project Blackout wasn't just an attack on American infrastructure. It was the opening phase of a coordinated campaign designed to destabilize Western governments through systematic destruction of civilian systems. Phase 1 targeted the United States. Phase 2 would focus on European power grids. Phase 3 planned similar attacks against allies in Asia and Australia. The attack tools were elegant in their simplicity and terrifying in their potential effectiveness. Rather than attempting to destroy targeted systems directly, Kronos had developed methods for triggering cascading failures that would cause infrastructure networks to destroy themselves. Power grids would overload and shut down to prevent equipment damage. Water treatment facilities would activate safety protocols that halted distribution. Communication systems would isolate themselves to prevent contamination spread. The attacks would succeed by exploiting the defensive mechanisms designed to protect civilian infrastructure. Elena realized that conventional countermeasures would be ineffective against this approach. Government agencies could patch software vulnerabilities and strengthen network defenses, but they couldn't eliminate the safety systems that Kronos planned to exploit. The attack succeeded not by breaking infrastructure, but by convincing it to break itself, utilizing the very precautions designed to prevent catastrophic failures. Her analysis revealed that Kronos possessed detailed intelligence about every system they planned to target. Maintenance schedules, personnel rotations, upgrade timelines, emergency procedures, all cataloged with precision that suggested infiltration at the highest levels of government and industry. They weren't guessing about vulnerabilities. They had comprehensive maps of every weakness, provided by sources with access to classified information. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Kronos Industries operated as the visible front for an international network that included compromised officials, corrupted contractors, and ideological extremists united by their desire to demonstrate Western vulnerability. The corporate structure provided legitimate cover for activities that would have triggered immediate investigation if conducted by traditional terrorist organizations. At 10:47 a.m., Elena made a decision that would define the remainder of her life. Instead of simply gathering intelligence about Kronos' plans, she would actively sabotage their operations. The evidence she'd collected was overwhelming, but it would take weeks or months for appropriate authorities to verify her discoveries and implement countermeasures. Project Blackout would commence long before official responses could be organized. Her only option was to stop the attack herself. The transition from intelligence gathering to active sabotage required deploying tools she'd hoped never to use. Elena had spent years developing offensive capabilities as insurance against scenarios exactly like this one, but she'd never expected to employ them against adversaries with Kronos' sophistication. Her programs were designed for surgical precision rather than destructive force. But stopping Project Blackout would require both. Her first target was Kronos' backup systems. The company had distributed copies of their attack tools across multiple servers to ensure operational continuity if their primary systems were compromised. Elena's analysis had identified 17 separate locations where Project Blackout components were stored, from corporate headquarters in Geneva to shell companies in offshore jurisdictions. Eliminating the threat would require simultaneous attacks against all known repositories. The technical challenge was formidable. Elena needed to maintain her cover as an incompetent secretary while conducting coordinated cyber attacks against targets on 4 continents, using tools that pushed the boundaries of what individual operators could achieve. Her ancient Dell computer, impressive as her modifications had made it, lacked the processing power for operations of this magnitude. She would need to commandeer additional resources without triggering Meridian's security protocols. The solution came to her with elegant simplicity. Meridian's cybersecurity department operated a distributed computing network for analyzing large-scale threats, linking dozens of workstations into a unified processing system during intensive operations. Elena had observed the network's architecture during her years of covert research, identifying access points that could be exploited by someone with appropriate credentials. Dr. Hawthorne's workstation represented the perfect entry point. His security clearance provided access to the entire network, while his predictable absence during morning meetings created windows of opportunity for unauthorized access. Elena had been observing his password patterns for months, recognizing the rotation schedule he used for updating authentication credentials. At 10:52 a.m., while Dr. Hawthorne conducted his client presentation 3 floors above, Elena initiated her takeover of Meridian's distributed computing network. Her programs spread across the system like beneficial viruses, utilizing spare processing capacity from workstations whose users were attending meetings or conducting routine tasks. Within minutes, she commanded computational resources that exceeded anything available to individual hackers, transforming her cubicle into a command center capable of orchestrating global operations. The irony was delicious. Meridian's own cybersecurity infrastructure was being used to conduct the very operations it was designed to prevent. Elena had turned the company's defensive capabilities into offensive weapons, utilizing their resources to protect American interests while maintaining perfect operational security. If discovered, her activities would appear to originate from authorized departmental operations rather than unauthorized individual actions. Margaret's voice carried across the cubicle farm again as she conducted another impromptu inspection of administrative staff. Elena could hear her approaching, heels clicking against linoleum with the mechanical precision of someone who took satisfaction in finding fault with subordinates. The timing was particularly unfortunate, as Elena's expanded operations required constant monitoring to prevent detection by Meridian's automated security systems. The next few minutes would test Elena's ability to maintain her cover while conducting the most complex cyber attack of her career. Margaret's inspection would demand her attention for social interaction and procedural compliance, creating windows of vulnerability where her unauthorized programs might trigger alerts or encounter unexpected obstacles. Success would require dividing her focus between appearing helplessly incompetent and demonstrating technical capabilities that redefined individual achievement. Elena minimized her active windows and opened a spreadsheet containing departmental phone numbers, creating the appearance of routine administrative work. Her background programs continued their operations invisibly, utilizing processing power from across Meridian's network, while she prepared to demonstrate the acting skills that had protected her identity for 3 years. Margaret materialized beside her cubicle with the inevitability of a natural disaster, clipboard armed and criticism prepared. Elena looked up with the expression of someone grateful for any attention from supervisory authority, internally calculating the probability that her cover would survive the next 10 minutes of performance evaluation. The woman who everyone called just a secretary was about to attempt something that professional intelligence agencies considered impossible. While pretending to struggle with basic office tasks, she would simultaneously coordinate cyber attacks against 17 targets across 4 continents, utilizing computational resources she'd stolen from her own employer to prevent the most devastating terrorist attack in American history. The ancient Dell computer on her desk displayed nothing more threatening than an email about office supply inventory. 3 floors above, executives discussed cybersecurity threats without knowing that their secretary was actively engaging those threats with capabilities that exceeded their imagination. In conference rooms across the building, engineers debated theoretical vulnerabilities while Elena exploited real weaknesses to protect the very infrastructure they were trying to defend. Margaret began her inspection with predictable criticism of Elena's workspace organization. The coffee stain on her keyboard provided perfect evidence of the incompetence that Margaret was certain defined Elena's character. As she documented this latest example of declining performance, Elena's programs achieved penetration of Kronos facilities in Switzerland, Brazil, and Singapore simultaneously. The next 8 minutes would determine whether Elena's months of preparation had created capabilities sufficient to prevent national catastrophe, or whether her discovery of Project Blackout would remain meaningless intelligence, trapped within the persona of a woman too powerless to act on what she'd learned. At 10:58 a.m., Elena Martinez began the most important performance of her life, pretending to be helplessly incompetent while saving her country from digital warfare that could have killed hundreds of thousands of people. The coffee-stained keyboard beneath her fingers had become the command interface for operations that would redefine what individual achievement could accomplish when intelligence was combined with determination and perfect operational security. Margaret's criticism continued, completely unaware that she was interrupting the prevention of national catastrophe to discuss proper filing procedures with the woman who was single-handedly protecting American civilization from its most sophisticated enemies. The first server in Geneva exploded at 11:14 a.m. Elena watched through satellite feeds as smoke poured from the Kronos Industries facility, her cyber attack having overloaded cooling systems until server banks reached critical temperatures. The elegant destruction was invisible to anyone observing her cubicle, where she appeared to be struggling with Margaret's latest criticism about proper email formatting, while simultaneously orchestrating precision strikes against targets across 4 continents. Margaret's voice droned on about professional correspondence standards. completely oblivious to the fact that her incompetent secretary had just eliminated 1/7 of Project Blackout's operational infrastructure. Elena nodded contritely, apologizing for grammatical errors in routine messages while her background programs executed commands that demonstrated technical sophistication beyond anything in Meridian's corporate arsenal. The contradiction between perception and reality had reached surreal proportions. As Margaret lectured about attention to detail, Elena was managing 17 simultaneous cyber attacks with precision that professional intelligence agencies couldn't replicate. While being criticized for slow response times, she was penetrating military-grade security systems faster than their designers had thought possible. The woman who questioned her ability to handle basic office tasks remained unaware that Elena was preventing the most devastating terrorist attack in American history. At 11:18 a.m., the facility in Singapore suffered a catastrophic power surge. Elena's programs had infiltrated their electrical management systems, creating feedback loops that overwhelmed surge protectors and destroyed critical hardware. The attack appeared to be an equipment malfunction rather than deliberate sabotage, providing perfect cover while eliminating another repository of Project Blackout components. Margaret's inspection revealed what she considered damning evidence of Elena's declining performance. The coffee stain on her keyboard, the disorganized appearance of her workspace, the apparent confusion about departmental procedures, all documented with bureaucratic precision that would support her recommendation for termination. The irony was exquisite. Elena was being evaluated for incompetence during the exact moments when she was demonstrating capabilities that redefined individual achievement. Elena's peripheral vision caught movement in Dr. Hawthorne's office as he returned from his client presentation. His predictable routine would bring him past her cubicle within minutes, providing another opportunity for discovery that could expose her unauthorized use of Meridian's computational resources. She needed to complete her operations before his inevitable inspection of departmental activities, while simultaneously maintaining the facade of helpless submission to Margaret's criticism. The Brazilian facility proved more challenging than expected. Kronos had implemented adaptive security protocols that adjusted to penetration attempts in real time, creating moving targets that frustrated conventional attack methodologies. But Elena's tools evolved faster than defensive countermeasures could adapt, learning from each exchange and becoming more sophisticated with every attempt. Her programs didn't just attack Kronos' systems, they studied their responses, developing countermeasures for defenses that didn't exist when her operation began. At 11:23 a.m., she achieved breakthrough penetration of the Sao Paulo servers. What she discovered there confirmed her most pessimistic projections about Project Blackout's scope and sophistication. The facility contained not just backup copies of attack tools, but also intelligence dossiers on American infrastructure personnel, detailed schedules of maintenance operations, and real-time monitoring systems that track defensive preparations by government agencies. Kronos knew exactly how America would respond to their attack because they had infiltrated the very organizations responsible for cybersecurity defense. Elena's analysis revealed compromised officials at the Department of Homeland Security, corrupted contractors with access to classified defense systems, and ideological extremists positioned throughout the infrastructure management hierarchy. The conspiracy reached levels of government that she hadn't imagined possible. Margaret's critique concluded with formal documentation of Elena's supposed performance deficiencies, creating a paper trail that would justify her termination within days. Elena signed the disciplinary report with appropriate shame, acknowledging shortcomings in areas where she actually possessed world-class expertise. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming, accepting criticism for incompetence while simultaneously demonstrating capabilities that exceeded professional intelligence agencies. As Margaret returned to her office with satisfied expression, Elena accelerated her operations against the remaining Kronos facilities. Time was becoming critical, as her unauthorized use of Meridian's network created increasing risk of detection by automated security systems. Dr. Hawthorne's return meant that system administrators would begin their afternoon monitoring routines, scanning for anomalous activity that could reveal her commandeering of departmental resources. The Hong Kong facility surrendered to her assault at 11:29 a.m. Elena's programs had identified a vulnerability in their backup power systems, creating cascading failures that destroyed server banks while appearing to be infrastructure accidents rather than deliberate attacks. The destruction was thorough and irreversible, eliminating critical components of Project Blackout, while maintaining perfect operational security. Dr. Hawthorne's voice carried across the cubicle farm as he conducted his customary post-meeting walkthrough, discussing technical concepts with engineers who respected his expertise. Elena could hear him approaching her area, engaged in conversation about network topology that demonstrated genuine understanding of cybersecurity principles. The irony wasn't lost on her. He was explaining defensive strategies to colleagues, while remaining completely unaware that his secretary was conducting offensive operations that surpassed anything in their professional experience. Elena's hands moved across her keyboard with practiced efficiency, closing classified programs and opening mundane applications that supported her cover identity. To casual observers, she appeared to be cleaning up the morning's coffee mess and responding to routine correspondence. In reality, she was orchestrating the final phases of an operation that had eliminated 2/3 of Project Blackout's infrastructure while maintaining perfect operational security. The remaining Kronos facilities represented the most challenging targets, protected by security systems that had learned from the attacks against their sister installations. Elena's earlier successes had triggered enhanced defensive protocols, creating moving targets that adapted faster than conventional penetration techniques could overcome. But her tools incorporated machine learning algorithms that evolved in response to countermeasures, becoming more sophisticated with each exchange. At 11:34 a.m., Dr. Hawthorne reached her cubicle. Elena looked up with the expression of someone grateful for attention from supervisory authority, internally calculating the probability that her cover would survive close inspection by someone with genuine technical expertise. Unlike Margaret's bureaucratic criticism, Dr. Hawthorne possessed the knowledge necessary to recognize sophisticated operations if he observed them directly. The conversation that followed would later be studied by behavioral analysts as a masterpiece of psychological misdirection. Dr. Hawthorne asked about her morning activities, questioned her understanding of department procedures, and requested updates on filing projects that demonstrated his assumption of her limited capabilities. Elena responded with appropriate deference, discussing mundane administrative tasks while her background programs executed commands against targets he couldn't imagine. Director Sarah Chen of the National Cybersecurity Alliance spoke with the measured precision of someone accustomed to conversations that could reshape international relations. Elena had never heard of the alliance, which suggested it operated at classification levels beyond conventional intelligence agencies. The briefing that followed confirmed Elena's suspicions about the broader implications of her Operation Blackout intervention. Intelligence agencies had spent 3 weeks analyzing the evidence she'd provided, unraveling a conspiracy that reached deeper into American infrastructure than anyone had imagined possible. The Kronos network represented just the visible surface of infiltration efforts that had been developing for nearly a decade. Director Chen's revelations were staggering in their scope. The systematic compromise of civilian infrastructure had been coordinated by a coalition of hostile nations working through private contractors, criminal organizations, and ideological extremists, united by their desire to demonstrate Western vulnerability. Kronos Industries served as the operational front for activities that could have paralyzed American society for months, while appearing to be natural disasters rather than coordinated attacks. Elena listened to the classified briefing while maintaining perfect operational security, her responses carefully modulated to avoid revealing the depth of her technical knowledge. Director Chen believed she was speaking with a patriotic citizen who had stumbled upon intelligence through routine administrative work, never suspecting that Elena had actively penetrated and destroyed the conspiracy through capabilities that exceeded professional intelligence agencies. The director's request was both flattering and terrifying. The alliance wanted to recruit Elena as a specialist consultant, utilizing her apparent access to corporate intelligence networks for ongoing counterintelligence operations. The position would provide government protections, substantial financial compensation, and resources that could amplify her individual capabilities beyond anything she'd previously imagined. Elena's response was immediate and non-negotiable. She would continue her current work independently, maintaining the cover identity that had proven so effective while remaining available for consultation on specific threats that required her unique expertise. At 11:47 a.m., she achieved simultaneous penetration of facilities in Mumbai, Cairo, and Mexico City. Her programs executed with flawless coordination, creating cascading system failures that appeared to originate from different sources using unrelated methodologies. The attacks succeeded through Elena's understanding that effective deception required making each incident look like isolated accident rather than components of systematic campaign. The destruction was thorough and elegant, Server banks overheated from cooling system failures. Backup power supplies overloaded from electrical surges. Network connections severed from routing protocol corruption. Each facility suffered unique catastrophes that shared no apparent common elements, preventing Kronos from recognizing the coordinated nature of attacks that had eliminated 90% of Project Blackout's operational infrastructure. Elena's monitoring systems detected increased activity from Kronos security teams as they began investigating the pattern of equipment failures. Their analysis would eventually identify the coordinated timing that revealed deliberate sabotage, but by then her operation would be complete and her digital traces eliminated. She had perhaps 20 minutes before their investigation reached conclusions that would trigger massive counterattacks against any systems they could identify as potential sources. The final two facilities represented her greatest challenge. Located in Geneva and London, they housed the primary command servers that controlled Project Blackout's remaining operational capacity. Unlike the backup repositories she'd already eliminated, these installations contained the core programming necessary to coordinate attacks against American infrastructure. Destroying them would require techniques that pushed beyond anything she'd attempted previously. At 11:52 a.m., Elena made a decision that would define the remainder of her career. Instead of simply sabotaging Kronos' remaining systems, she would expose their entire operation to appropriate authorities while maintaining her own operational security. The intelligence she'd gathered during her penetration included comprehensive evidence of the conspiracy, detailed documentation of infiltration networks, and real-time proof of planned attacks against civilian infrastructure. Her solution was elegant in its simplicity. Elena would use Kronos' own communication systems to broadcast evidence of their activities to every major intelligence agency simultaneously, creating an information disclosure that would trigger immediate government response while making her own role invisible. The revelation would appear to originate from internal Kronos sources rather than external penetration, protecting her identity while ensuring maximum credibility for the intelligence. The technical challenge was formidable. Elena needed to access Kronos' internal messaging systems, compile comprehensive evidence packages, and distribute them through channels that would guarantee delivery to appropriate officials, all while maintaining perfect operational security and completing the destruction of their remaining attack capabilities. She would need to accomplish in minutes what professional intelligence agencies typically required months to achieve. Elena's fingers flew across her keyboard with intensity that would have impressed concert pianists, executing commands that demonstrated technical sophistication beyond conventional training. Her ancient Dell computer had become a command center, coordinating operations across continents, utilizing computational resources she'd borrowed from Meridian's network to conduct the most complex cyber attack in corporate history. At 11:57 a.m., she achieved simultaneous penetration of the Geneva and London command servers. What she discovered there validated every assumption she'd made about Project Blackout's scope and confirmed her most pessimistic projections about the conspiracy's reach. The servers contained not just attack tools and target intelligence, but also communication logs that revealed the full extent of American infrastructure infiltration. The evidence was overwhelming. Kronos had compromised officials at the highest levels of government, infiltrated defense contractors with access to classified systems, and positioned operatives throughout the civilian infrastructure hierarchy. Their intelligence networks provided real-time information about defensive preparations, allowing them to adjust attack strategies faster than countermeasures could be implemented. Elena compiled this evidence into packages designed for immediate distribution to intelligence agencies, law enforcement organizations, and congressional oversight committees. Her documentation included not just proof of planned attacks, but also comprehensive identification of compromised personnel, detailed analysis of infiltration methods, and actionable intelligence that would enable systematic dismantling of the entire conspiracy. The distribution system she'd created utilized Kronos' own communication networks to broadcast evidence to multiple recipients simultaneously, creating an information flood that would overwhelm any attempt at suppression or misdirection. The intelligence would reach appropriate authorities through channels that guaranteed credibility, while making her own role invisible to investigation. At 12:03 p.m., Elena initiated the final phase of her operation. Her programs began systematic destruction of Kronos' remaining attack capabilities, while simultaneously broadcasting evidence of their conspiracy to intelligence agencies across the Western Alliance. The coordination was flawless, eliminating operational threats while ensuring that appropriate authorities received actionable intelligence about the broader infiltration network. The London facility erupted in electrical fires as Elena's programs overloaded their power distribution systems beyond safety limits. Emergency suppression systems activated automatically, flooding server rooms with fire retardant that completed the destruction of sensitive electronic equipment. The facility's communication systems had broadcast their complete intelligence archive seconds before the destruction commenced, ensuring that evidence reached intended recipients before physical elimination of the source. The Geneva Command Center suffered simultaneous catastrophic failures across multiple systems. Elena's programs had identified critical vulnerabilities in their climate control, power management, and network infrastructure, creating cascading breakdowns that destroyed Project Blackout's central coordination capabilities while appearing to be infrastructure accidents rather than deliberate sabotage. As smoke cleared from Kronos facilities across 4 continents, Elena's monitoring systems confirmed complete elimination of Project Blackout's operational infrastructure. The planned attacks against American civilian systems had been prevented through systematic destruction of the tools, intelligence, and coordination networks necessary for implementation. More importantly, her evidence packages were being received and analyzed by intelligence agencies that would initiate comprehensive investigations into the conspiracy she'd uncovered. Margaret's voice carried across the cubicle farm as she announced the lunch hour, completely unaware that her incompetent secretary had just prevented the most devastating terrorist attack in American history. Elena saved her mundane spreadsheet and powered down her ancient Dell computer, erasing any traces of the morning's activities while maintaining the appearance of someone grateful for a break from routine administrative tasks. Dr. Hawthorne passed her cubicle again, engaged in technical discussion with colleagues about theoretical cybersecurity threats. The conversation included speculation about recent equipment failures at various international facilities, analysis that demonstrated his genuine expertise while revealing his complete ignorance of the real events that had transpired. Elena listened with polite attention, internally amused by the irony of experts discussing effects while remaining unaware of causes. At 12:17 p.m., Elena's secure communication system received confirmation that her evidence packages had reached their intended recipients. Intelligence agencies were beginning preliminary analysis of the Kronos conspiracy, law enforcement organizations were preparing arrest warrants for identified operatives, and congressional committees were scheduling emergency hearings to address infrastructure vulnerabilities she'd exposed. The response would unfold over coming weeks as appropriate authorities implemented systematic countermeasures against the infiltration network she'd revealed. Compromised officials would be identified and removed from sensitive positions. Corrupted contractors would face federal prosecution for espionage. Infrastructure security protocols would be enhanced to prevent similar vulnerabilities in the future. Elena gathered her personal belongings and prepared for her lunch break, maintaining the facade of someone whose greatest achievement was surviving another morning of corporate tedium. Her colleagues observed her departure with mixture of pity and indifference, never suspecting that the woman they dismissed as barely competent had just demonstrated capabilities that redefined individual achievement. As she walked toward the elevator, Elena reflected on the morning's events with satisfaction that bordered on euphoria. Operation successful, threat eliminated, evidence distributed, cover maintained. She had accomplished everything she'd planned while preserving the anonymity that protected her from retaliation or unwanted attention. The world would never know that Elena Martinez had saved American civilization, and she preferred it that way. The elevator doors closed behind her as she descended toward the lobby, leaving behind a corporate environment that had never recognized her true capabilities. In Cubicle 47B, her ancient Dell computer sat silent and innocent, giving no indication that it had served as command center for the most sophisticated cyber attack in history. The coffee stain on her keyboard had dried completely, the only visible evidence of a morning that had changed everything while appearing to change nothing. 3 floors above, executives continued their cybersecurity briefings, analyzing theoretical threats, while remaining unaware that the woman who organized their files had just eliminated the most dangerous adversary they'd never known existed. In conference rooms throughout the building, engineers debated defensive strategies while their secretary walked to lunch, having successfully protected the very infrastructure they were trying to defend. Elena Martinez stepped into the Seattle sunlight, anonymous and underestimated, exactly as she preferred. Tomorrow she would return to her cubicle, answer phones, organize files, and endure criticism from supervisors who couldn't imagine her true capabilities. The coffee-stained keyboard would continue serving as perfect camouflage for operations that pushed the boundaries of individual achievement. But today, for the first time in 3 years, Elena allowed herself to smile with genuine satisfaction. The woman everyone called just a secretary had reminded the world that intelligence existed in forms that conventional wisdom couldn't recognize. Project Blackout was finished, its architects exposed, its victims protected by someone they'd never know existed. The simple woman who had been dismissed as incompetent had just saved her country from digital warfare that could have killed hundreds of thousands of people. The ancient Dell computer that everyone mocked as obsolete had served as a weapon system capable of reaching across continents to strike at enemies hidden behind military-grade defenses. Margaret Thornfield would return from lunch to find Elena's workspace exactly as she'd left it, organized with bureaucratic precision that betrayed no hint of the morning's extraordinary activities. Dr. Hawthorne would continue discussing cybersecurity threats without knowing that his secretary had just eliminated the most sophisticated adversary in the field. The corporate hierarchy that had rendered Elena invisible would continue functioning exactly as before, never recognizing that their most valuable asset had been hiding in plain sight all along. As Elena walked toward her favorite lunch spot, she considered the future with anticipation rather than resignation. Her success with Project Blackout had validated techniques and capabilities that opened possibilities she'd never previously imagined. There were other threats to discover, other conspiracies to unravel, other ways to protect people who would never know they needed protection. The woman who everyone underestimated had just demonstrated that the most powerful weapons in the digital age weren't technology or training, but intelligence combined with determination and perfect operational security. Elena Martinez had found her true calling, hidden beneath the perfect camouflage of corporate anonymity. Tomorrow she would return to organizing files and answering phones, maintaining the facade that protected her from unwanted attention, while positioning her to identify the next threat that required her unique intervention. The coffee-stained keyboard would continue serving as command interface for operations that governments couldn't accomplish and corporations couldn't imagine. The simple secretary had just changed the world, and nobody would ever know. The secure phone call came 3 weeks later, disrupting Elena's carefully maintained routine of corporate invisibility. She was organizing quarterly reports in her cubicle when the encrypted device hidden beneath her desk began its silent vibration pattern, indicating communication from sources that didn't officially exist. Elena glanced around the empty office space, confirming that Margaret had left for her extended lunch meeting, and Dr. Hawthorne remained locked in his afternoon technical review session. The voice on the encrypted line carried authority that transcended normal government channels. Director Sarah Chen of the National Cybersecurity Alliance spoke with the measured precision of someone accustomed to conversations that could reshape international relations. Elena had never heard of the alliance, which suggested it operated at classification levels beyond conventional intelligence agencies. The briefing that followed confirmed Elena's suspicions about the broader implications of her Operation Blackout intervention. Intelligence agencies had spent 3 weeks analyzing the evidence she'd provided, unraveling a conspiracy that reached deeper into American infrastructure than anyone had imagined possible. The Kronos network represented just the visible surface of infiltration efforts that had been developing for nearly a decade. Director Chen's revelations were staggering in their scope. The systematic compromise of civilian infrastructure had been coordinated by a coalition of hostile nations working through private contractors, criminal organizations, and ideological extremists, united by their desire to demonstrate Western vulnerability. Kronos Industries served as the operational front for activities that could have paralyzed American society for months, while appearing to be natural disasters rather than coordinated attacks. Elena listened to the classified briefing while maintaining perfect operational security, her responses carefully modulated to avoid revealing the depth of her technical knowledge. Director Chen believed she was speaking with a patriotic citizen who had stumbled upon intelligence through routine administrative work, never suspecting that Elena had actively penetrated and destroyed the conspiracy through capabilities that exceeded professional intelligence agencies. The director's request was both flattering and terrifying. The Alliance wanted to recruit Elena as a specialist consultant, utilizing her apparent access to corporate intelligence networks for ongoing counterintelligence operations. The position would provide government protections, substantial financial compensation, and resources that could amplify her individual capabilities beyond anything she'd previously imagined. Elena's response was immediate. and non-negotiable. She would continue her current work independently, maintaining the cover identity that had proven so effective while remaining available for consultation on specific threats that required her unique expertise. Government employment would compromise the anonymity that made her operations possible, transforming her from invisible asset into visible target for retaliation by hostile agencies. Director Chen's disappointment was evident but understanding. The alliance would respect Elena's decision while maintaining communication channels for future coordination. They had established monitoring systems that would alert her to emerging threats requiring her intervention, creating informal partnership that preserved her operational independence while providing government resources when needed. The conversation concluded with encrypted contact protocols and emergency communication procedures that would connect her directly to Alliance leadership during crisis situations. Elena had become an unofficial asset of the most classified cybersecurity organization in the American government, recognized for capabilities that she could never acknowledge publicly while maintaining the perfect cover of corporate insignificance. As she returned to her mundane filing tasks, Elena reflected on the unexpected validation her success had provided. 3 weeks ago, she had been a secretary whose warnings would have been dismissed as delusional fantasies. Today she was a consultant whose insights shaped national security policy at the highest levels of government. The transformation had occurred without changing her visible circumstances or revealing her true capabilities to anyone in her immediate environment. Margaret Thornfield returned from her lunch meeting with renewed determination to document Elena's performance deficiencies, completely unaware that her incompetent secretary now held security clearances that exceeded those of most government officials. The irony was exquisite. Elena was being evaluated for termination by a supervisor whose own background investigation wouldn't qualify her for access to the intelligence reports that Elena helped generate. The afternoon brought routine administrative tasks that provided perfect camouflage for Elena's expanded monitoring activities. Her ancient Dell computer had been quietly upgraded with hardware provided through Alliance channels, enhancing her capabilities while maintaining the appearance of obsolete equipment that reinforced perceptions of her limited technical sophistication. The coffee-stained keyboard now concealed processing power that rivaled government supercomputers. At 2:47 p.m., Elena's enhanced monitoring systems detected unusual network activity emanating from Meridian's financial division. The patterns were subtle, almost invisible to conventional security measures, but they matched signatures she'd learned to recognize during her analysis of international infiltration efforts. Someone was conducting unauthorized reconnaissance of Meridian's classified contract databases, probing for intelligence about government cybersecurity initiatives. Elena's investigation revealed a sophisticated penetration operation that had been developing for months, utilizing techniques that demonstrated familiarity with her own methods. The attackers had studied her elimination of the Kronos network, learning from her approach while developing countermeasures for the defensive strategies that her success had inspired. They knew about her, even if they couldn't identify her specific location or methodology. The realization was chilling. Elena's intervention against Project Blackout had prevented immediate catastrophe, while simultaneously revealing capabilities that hostile agencies were now attempting to replicate or neutralize. Her success had made her a target for adversaries who understood that individual operators could achieve results that formal organizations couldn't match. The cat-and-mouse game was entering a new phase where the mouse had proven capable of eating cats. Elena's analysis of the ongoing penetration revealed disturbing parallels to the Kronos methodology. The attackers were mapping Meridian's network architecture with precision that suggested inside knowledge, identifying vulnerabilities that weren't documented in any security assessment. Their reconnaissance focused specifically on Department K's operations, indicating interest in the cybersecurity projects that Elena observed daily, while maintaining her administrative cover. The timing was particularly concerning. Elena's recent communication with the Alliance had utilized Meridian's network infrastructure for encrypted channel establishment, creating digital signatures that sophisticated adversaries might recognize as indicators of unusual activity. Her operational security had been compromised not through detection of her techniques, but through analysis of communication patterns that revealed government interest in someone within the corporate structure. At 3:15 p.m., Elena made a decision that would redefine her relationship with both Meridian and the Alliance. Instead of simply reporting the intrusion to appropriate authorities, she would actively engage the attackers in digital combat, using the encounter to gather intelligence about hostile capabilities, while protecting the company that provided her cover identity. The operation would require techniques that pushed beyond anything she'd attempted previously. Her first challenge was conducting offensive operations against sophisticated adversaries while maintaining perfect operational security within Meridian's monitored network environment. Elena needed to appear completely normal to corporate security systems while simultaneously engaging in digital warfare that could trigger international incidents if discovered. The technical and psychological demands would test every skill she'd developed during her years of covert operations. Elena began by creating false flag operations that would misdirect the attacker's attention away from her actual activities. Her programs generated network traffic patterns that appeared to originate from Meridian's cybersecurity team, creating the impression that professional IT staff had detected the intrusion and were implementing conventional countermeasures. The deception would buy her time while convincing the attackers that they faced predictable opposition rather than individual capabilities they couldn't anticipate. The enemy response was immediate and sophisticated. They adjusted their penetration techniques to avoid the defensive measures that Elena's false flags had simulated, demonstrating adaptive capabilities that confirmed her assessment of their professional training. These weren't amateur hackers or conventional criminal organizations. They represented state-sponsored operations with resources that matched anything in the American intelligence community. Elena's counterattack began with reconnaissance designed to identify the source and scope of the hostile operation. Her programs traced network connections through multiple proxy servers and routing protocols, following digital breadcrumbs that led across 3 continents before reaching command servers hidden behind military-grade security measures. The infrastructure suggested coordination between multiple hostile agencies united by their interest in neutralizing her capabilities. At 3:28 p.m., Margaret appeared beside Elena's cubicle for another impromptu performance evaluation, timing that couldn't have been worse given the intensity of the digital combat Elena was conducting. Her supervisor's criticism focused on apparent inefficiencies in Elena's afternoon productivity, questioning her understanding of departmental priorities, while Elena simultaneously managed offensive operations against adversaries who were actively attempting to penetrate the building's most sensitive systems. The conversation that followed represented a masterpiece of compartmentalization. Elena responded to Margaret's bureaucratic criticism with appropriate humility, while her background programs executed commands that demonstrated technical sophistication beyond anything in Meridian's corporate arsenal. She apologized for perceived shortcomings in areas where she was actively preventing hostile espionage, accepting responsibility for inefficiencies while protecting national security through individual capabilities that her supervisor couldn't imagine. Margaret's inspection revealed evidence that reinforced her conviction about Elena's fundamental inadequacy for corporate employment. The apparent confusion about routine procedures, the humble acceptance of criticism about areas where Elena actually possessed world-class expertise, the grateful deference to supervisory authority while conducting operations that exceeded professional intelligence agencies. The performance was flawless, maintaining cover that had protected Elena's identity for 3 years while she engaged in digital warfare. As Margaret concluded her evaluation and returned to her office, Elena accelerated her offensive operations against the hostile network. Time was becoming critical as the attackers adjusted their techniques to counter the defensive measures they believed they faced, creating moving targets that required constant adaptation of her penetration methods. She needed to achieve decisive results before they recognized that individual capabilities, rather than institutional responses, were opposing their operations. Elena's breakthrough came at 3:41 p.m. when her programs achieved penetration of the attacker's command infrastructure. What she discovered there confirmed her most pessimistic projections about the scope and sophistication of the operations targeting her. The hostile network included compromised assets within multiple American corporations, government agencies, and allied intelligence services, all coordinated through an international coalition that had been studying her methods since her intervention against Project Blackout. The intelligence was comprehensive and terrifying. Enemy analysts had reconstructed her operational techniques through forensic examination of the Kronos network destruction, identifying signature patterns that revealed individual rather than institutional capabilities. They knew that a single operator had achieved results that formal organizations couldn't replicate, and they were systematically searching for the source through infiltration of every company and agency that might harbor such an asset. Elena realized that her continued presence at Meridian represented an unacceptable risk to both the company and her own operational security. The hostile network was conducting systematic reconnaissance of every individual, with access to the corporate systems she'd utilized during her intervention against Project Blackout. Discovery was inevitable if she remained in a position that connected her to those activities, regardless of how carefully she maintained her cover identity. Her solution was elegant in its audacity. Elena would eliminate the hostile network while simultaneously arranging her own departure from Meridian in a manner that deflected suspicion away from her true activities. The operation would require coordination between her offensive capabilities and carefully orchestrated personal circumstances that explained her resignation without revealing the intelligence considerations that actually motivated her decision. At 3:52 p.m., Elena initiated systematic destruction of the hostile network's operational infrastructure. Her programs moved through their systems like digital wildfire, corrupting databases, destroying communication links, and eliminating coordination capabilities while creating false attribution trails that suggested attacks by rival intelligence agencies rather than individual operators. The destruction was thorough and irreversible, neutralizing threats while maintaining perfect operational security. Simultaneously, she began implementation of her departure strategy. Elena had been documenting Margaret's hostile treatment for months, creating comprehensive records of discriminatory behavior that would support hostile workplace claims if properly presented to corporate human resources. Her resignation would appear to result from legitimate grievances about supervisory harassment, rather than intelligence considerations that couldn't be acknowledged publicly. The timing was critical. Elena needed to eliminate the hostile network before they achieved penetration of Meridian's most sensitive systems, while arranging her departure before their investigation could identify her as the source of the capabilities they were seeking. Success required coordination between digital warfare and personal circumstances that maintained her anonymity while protecting both the company and national security interests. Elena's programs achieved systematic destruction of hostile infrastructure across 4 continents within 17 minutes, utilizing techniques that made each attack appear to originate from different sources using unrelated methodologies. Command servers in Beijing suffered power distribution failures. Communication links in Moscow were severed by routing protocol corruption. Coordination facilities in Tehran experienced cascading system breakdowns that destroyed sensitive electronic equipment. The destruction was comprehensive and elegant, eliminating operational threats while creating false attribution patterns that would misdirect any investigation away from individual capabilities toward conventional interagency conflicts. Elena had turned the hostile network's own coordination systems against them, utilizing their infrastructure to broadcast evidence of their activities to rival intelligence agencies that would interpret the intelligence as opportunities for competitive advantage. At 4:17 p.m., Dr. Hawthorne returned from his technical review session, engaged in animated discussion with colleagues about emerging cybersecurity threats. Elena could hear him approaching her cubicle, analyzing theoretical vulnerabilities, while remaining completely unaware that his secretary had just eliminated the most sophisticated hostile network in corporate history. The irony was perfect. Experts discussing theoretical problems while she solved real ones through capabilities they couldn't recognize. Elena minimized her active programs and opened her resignation letter, a document she'd been preparing for weeks as insurance against circumstances exactly like these. Her reasons were carefully crafted to emphasize personal considerations rather than professional ones, focusing on family obligations and career development opportunities that deflected attention away from intelligence activities that couldn't be acknowledged. Dr. Hawthorne's inspection of her workspace revealed what he interpreted as evidence of declining engagement with departmental activities. Elena's apparent focus on personal correspondence rather than assigned tasks. Her distracted responses to technical discussions she supposedly couldn't understand. Her obvious preparation for departure from a position she'd never been suited for in the first place. He made mental notes that would support her resignation without triggering investigation into the circumstances that actually motivated her decision. The conversation about her departure was brief and professional. Elena explained her decision in terms of personal growth opportunities, expressing gratitude for the experience while avoiding specific details about future plans that might create investigative interest. Dr. Hawthorne accepted her resignation with polite regret, never suspecting that he was losing one of the most valuable cybersecurity assets in American government service. Margaret's response to the resignation was predictably satisfied. Elena's departure validated her assessment of the woman's unsuitability for corporate employment, confirming suspicions that had motivated months of documented criticism. The resignation would be processed efficiently, eliminating a personnel problem while creating opportunities for hiring someone actually qualified for the position. As Elena prepared her personal belongings for departure, she reflected on the elegant completion of her time at Meridian Defense Technologies. 3 years of perfect cover identity had provided opportunities for individual achievement that redefined the possibilities of cybersecurity operations. Her intervention against Project Blackout had prevented national catastrophe while establishing capabilities that now protected American interests through informal coordination with the highest levels of government. The ancient Dell computer that had served as her command center would remain behind, its modifications invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly what to look for. The coffee-stained keyboard would continue concealing processing capabilities that had coordinated operations across continents, serving future occupants who would never suspect its true potential. Elena's technological legacy would persist long after her departure, providing resources for capabilities that corporate security couldn't imagine. Her resignation took effect immediately, allowing her to depart before the end of the business day, while maintaining professional courtesy toward colleagues who had never recognized her true value. Elena gathered her personal effects with the same careful attention to detail that had characterized every aspect of her operational security, ensuring that no traces remained of the activities that had defined her real work during the past 3 years. The elevator doors closed behind her for the final time as she descended toward the lobby, leaving behind a corporate environment that had never understood what they were losing. Cubicle 47B would be reassigned to another administrative assistant within days, someone who would organize files and answer phones without realizing that they occupied a workspace where individual capabilities had changed the course of international relations. Elena stepped into the Seattle afternoon sunlight as a free agent for the first time in 3 years, her operational independence restored while maintaining connections to resources that amplified her individual capabilities beyond anything she'd previously imagined. The Alliance would continue providing intelligence about emerging threats that required her intervention, creating informal partnership that preserved her anonymity while protecting American interests through methods that formal organizations couldn't acknowledge. Her future stretched ahead with possibilities that had been impossible to imagine when she first arrived at Meridian as a secretary whose warnings would have been dismissed as delusional fantasies. Today, she was a consultant whose insights shaped national security policy at levels that most government officials never reached. The transformation had occurred through demonstrated capabilities rather than credentials, proving that excellence could emerge from sources that conventional wisdom couldn't recognize. Elena walked toward her modest apartment with satisfaction that bordered on euphoria, carrying secrets that would never be acknowledged publicly, while knowing that her individual achievements had protected millions of people who would never know they'd needed protection. The woman everyone had called just a secretary had redefined what single operators could accomplish when intelligence was combined with determination and perfect operational security. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities for intervention against threats that formal agencies couldn't address through conventional methods. Elena Martinez had found her true calling in the space between official acknowledgement and effective action, where individual capabilities could achieve results that institutions couldn't imagine. The coffee-stained keyboard had been just the beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.